All right, so I've got a few pictures in here just to kind of point out some things. What does a steam fitter do? What do we do every day at work? Well, here, you can see all kinds of piping on there. All that piping was installed at some point by a steam fitter. That's actually a gas turbine up at the Port Washington powerhouse. And all that related piping, all the welding, everything, all the bolted flanges, everything on there was installed by someone who at some point went through an apprenticeship and now is probably or is a journey level worker or still an apprentice. You can see in this shot another job site, a lot of piping hanging from the ceiling, a lot of piping coming up through shafts, walls, through the floors. All that's installed by everyone in our industry. Some other pictures you can see, complex piping systems. You know, buildings, hospitals, schools, everywhere we work and we go in, somewhere in the building there's piping systems that either convey the heating or cooling type piping. Some more piping. You can see here when I talked about rigging, those are relief valves that sit on top of the boiler. Those are probably about 25,000 pounds each. As you can see, we have to use equipment to move things around and get it into place and eventually weld it in. But that's the nature of our work. That's what we do. Again, here's some piping. You can see people on the job, how many people it takes to erect a building with all this different piping in it. Now this is just one example, of course, but we also, it's not only limited to powerhouses, again, hospitals, schools. We do a lot of work in the food and dairy industry. We are the dairy state, so there's so many different food production plants. There's dairies, breweries. Miller Brewing, a big one. When all the breweries were still in Milwaukee, miles and miles and miles of piping in those facilities. Steamfitters at some point had to put all that piping in, obviously for the end product to produce the beer or the beverage. Coca-Cola's here, Ocean Spray down in Kenosha, Kikkoman. I can go on and on about all the different facilities that we have people working in. But again, all that requires someone has to learn how to put all that piping in. You can see here they're working on, it's just somebody welding on some piping within that plant. There they go, they're welding on it. It's a header off of a boiler drum that they're working on. So I can tell you the things that we see people struggle with now coming into the industry. Fractions. Real problem with fractions. Multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting fractions. If I could have one wish and make things all better, I would say let's get them better educated in how to do fractions. Longhand division. We have computers, we have calculators that we let everyone use, but when we go back to the basics, we start at the basics. When we have apprentices come in and kind of get them up to speed, they have to be able to do longhand division, longhand multiplication. People struggle with that, and even young people surprisingly are struggling with that. We expect people who've been out of school for 20 years to have to go back and refresh themselves on how to do that because maybe they haven't used it, especially fractions. But even young people are struggling with that too. Decimals, converting decimals to a fraction, fractions to a decimal. Problem. We do a lot of that in our industry. A lot of the drawings we get, especially if equipment is built overseas, it's either in metric, we have to convert from metric to English, or decimals. We get things in decimals of an inch, and we have to be able to convert that to be able to do what we need to do with the installation. So the math is the big thing. If they want to come in the industry, they would call us, and we would tell them, if I understand what you're asking, they'd have to attend a trade orientation. And that pink sheet or that salmon colored sheet that we had on the tables, that is actually our trade orientation information. It's the same for both the HVAC service and the steam fitter. We combine them. But what we do there is we just go through a brief overview of what the industry is, what the requirements are, what the apprenticeship is, how long it is, basically what I did here today. Once they're through the trade orientation, they can fill out an application for either trade at that time. We accept that. We ask them to bring their high school diploma or the GED with them. We do accept that at that time. Any resumes, if someone wants to submit a resume. At that point, they'll get a letter. We'll process the information. They get a letter from us, they can go and test it. It's basically a release letter, a letter to test. I should say, you know what I mean. Then they can go over to any of the technical colleges and they can do their acuplacer testing, they can do their mechanical spatial testing. Once they've gone through that and they've achieved the minimum standard, which is if you're familiar with it, I'm sure you all are, the Stay 9 scores. Stay 9 score of 5 is what we require for entrance. Once they achieve that, then they come into the Joint Apprenticeship Committee meeting and they'll get a letter of introduction here in Madison. And at that point they can go out and send in resumes, they can fill out applications to employers, send in resumes to employers, they give them a list of all the employers who employ apprentices through the local union in this area, and then they can go out and try to get sponsored or get hired as a pre-apprentice.
Yeah, it was actually really easy. I did it basically most of it from Minnesota over the phone. Everyone's so kind and helpful. They give you exact contact information, dates, times. And I was able to settle that up from Minnesota, come here, begin the process. It worked really well. Everyone's very helpful. I had to set up the testing and then the orientation, which is still, I believe, once a month. Mm-hmm. And anything worthwhile takes a little bit of time, but it was very easy. Everyone was very helpful. Within about a month or two, I'd say, I completed all my prerequisites, and it was pretty easy, I guess. As long as I studied before I took the test. I did all the prep that I could just to make sure that I was prepared properly for that, and it went well, and I got where I am now. So.
Well, mine was a little bit different. I was in the Army for 6 years, and I went to Iraq, and I came back, and I couldn't get a job. They just flat out don't hire you. And so I was at drill one weekend, and they were talking about this program that you could go into where they teach you how to weld, and then you can get an apprenticeship. And I had no idea what a steamfitter was, but I was like, I'm at my last limit, I need a job. So I went to this interview, and I actually got into the program, and I went through, it was like 6 months of all you do weld. And then I got 2 weld certifications out of that class, and then I was able to just start my apprenticeship right away because I already knew how to weld. So I had a skill that they needed, and that's how I got in.
The United Association, which is our international union, they have a program, I don't know if anyone's heard of it, called the Veterans in Piping, which gives returning veterans an opportunity to transition back into a civilian career. So what they're doing is at the time they were running an 18-week course. Did you go through 18 or 20? It changed a couple times.
I think it was like
20. 20-week course where they would give them some basic skills about the industry, but they really emphasize the welding because right now, their estimates put us at about 200,000 welders nationwide short. Welding is a skill that is in very high demand throughout any industry, manufacturing, construction, whatever. So that's what they focused on. And again, our industry is so heavily based on welding skills. As far as an employable skill, welding is always one that we tell people that if you have weld skills or weld certs, you're going to get to work faster than just someone who doesn't have a particular skill in welding.
Well, we started out just doing stick because that's what you're done in this field. But eventually you would do MIG, TIG. TIG is the job I was just at. TIG was really big. I've never TIG welded, but the guy that was with me, all he did was literally TIG stainless. So that's a big thing in our industry. I've only done stick and a little bit of TIG, but
depending on the job site, depending on the requirements of the job site, depending on the contractor, where you're working, the customer, pretty much all processes. Stick, wire, TIG, especially flux core, wire process. It's big. People who have those skills, who can do those processes, multiple processes, are going to have an opportunity to go to work much quicker, much sooner than someone who, in our industry, who doesn't have those skills. You know, with the apprenticeship, we always tell everyone, work towards getting at least one certification. And not everyone's going to be a welder, you understand that. Not everyone likes to be a welder, not everyone wants to be a welder. But the bottom line is when it comes to going to work or sitting on the out of work list or on unemployment, that's going to get someone to work faster. The job outlook, we kind of let the contractors let us know what the job outlook is. We can't predict it. We're not an employer. But I can tell you, one of the large projects that has put a lot of our members to work, of course, is Epic Medical Systems. And from what we're saying, there's 8-9 years worth of work that the contractor that's working out there says they already know about. So it is going to keep growing. We have about 30 people a year. Our average is about 30 people retire from this industry a year. And that's about what we take on in apprentices a year between Milwaukee and Madison. Overall, we have 1,800 working members, active working members. We lose about 32 retirement a year. So we try to maintain pace. Our membership, if we go back 10, 12 years, we look at the membership numbers overall, we maintain a real steady membership number throughout all the years. So we always try to supplement the workforce when people are going to be retiring. But then again, it all depends on the contractors. If they get real busy, like we have been the last 2-3 years here in the Madison area with all the UW work, they've put on doubled their apprentices in the last 3.5 years. They went from about 48 to 90. So, which is good. In the industry, I would say if you don't apply, well, then you'll definitely never get hired. If you don't go through the steps and you don't take the initiative to come in and at least find out what the industry is, fill out the application, get the letter of introduction, well, then you'll never get hired. The chances will be zero. So I always tell everyone, the worst thing you can do is you're going to give up a few hours of your life going through the process, and it may work out. But if you don't do it, it's never going to work out.